welcome back. Today we are going to be going on to the next lesson for Python, and we are going to be talking about classes. Now, we can use classes instead of functions if we would like, but you can write functions or classes depending on what you're doing. That's really up to you whether classes are better or functions, and it's really up to that coder. So today I'm going to be using a real world scenario. We're going to be using Siri, not the one that we've been building per se, but we're going to just use Siri as a class, and we're going to have it identify who is speaking, whether it is, and depending on who is speaking, it will access that person's playlist and add a song. So we can think of classes as objects. If you're familiar with JavaScript, we just call them classes here in Python, and that's not a problem. But you can imagine a class kind of like a real world object. So let's say that you have a boat as well as a car. Both of them have very similar attributes. Both of them are a vehicle, both of them have speeds, but both of them have very specific things. A car might have a specific amount of wheels, and a boat might have a specific number of sails. So we might have a class called vehicle, and everything about that vehicle that is the same, we will keep in a initial class. So we might have attributes like what the color is, the speed. We can even apply gravity if we wanted to, because gravity is going to be on the same no matter which vehicle it is. And then we can also have subclasses where we can inherit some of the same attributes, but then have more specific attributes such as a car or a boat. This is called inheritance. So if we have inheritance, that means that we don't have to rewrite code that we've written before. We can just call those attributes into our subclasses if we like to. So let's get into it. I just have a Replit open, and we're just going to keep this very, very simple at first. So how we define a class is we just simply say class space and then the name of your class. So in Python, we're going to have that uppercased, the first letter, okay? And that is it. Now we do usually have a function inside of here. The very first function is going to be your constructor. This is something that is going to be ran all the time, but we're going to keep this even more simple. We're not going to write that constructor quite yet. So I am going to define a function in here, and this is actually going to be a method. Now the difference between a method and a function is that a method is a function, but that function is defined inside of a class. So you'll just define it the same as you would with any other function that we've created. And I'll say that this is greet, and I'm going to add self to here. Now I'm going to explain what self is in just a couple minutes. Don't worry about it now. But every function or method inside of your class is going to have self as the first argument. For right now, I'm just going to say return, and we can just say hello. Now, of course, if I run this, it's not going to do anything, just like a function. I need to initialize our class by giving a class instance. So I'm going to say, we can just say salty equals, so salty as in my YouTube name, and I'm just going to say equals Siri like this. Now if I hit run, still nothing is happening, and that is just fine, okay? Because my class is not actually returning anything right now, but my function inside is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print, and I'm going to say salty, which is now an instance of Siri class, right? So salty, and inside I've got a method called greet. So I'm going to say salty dot greet, and that's how we access that inside of there. So I'm going to hit run, and now you can see that it says hello. So this is very cool. So if you have lots and lots of methods inside of your class, you can just say whoever dot greet or dot add song or dot whatever you'd like. Very good job. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create that constructor. Anytime you create a class, I always just have the rule of thumb. Next thing I should do after I define my class is write my constructor. So the constructor is a method itself, so def. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this weird dunder init. So it's underscore underscore init, which means initialize underscore underscore. And its arguments, we can pass in whatever we'd like, but because this is inside of a class, we do need to add the word self inside of there. Again, I'll explain that in just a sec. I'm going to pass a name And then I'm also going to pass a playlist, okay? And I am going to create a default argument inside of here. What that does is that if I don't pass anything here, instead of throwing an error, it's going to just be an empty list. Very simple. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say colon and have something inside of here. So I'm now going to take self dot name, each of these arguments after self here, okay, equals name, self dot playlist equals playlist. All right, and let's see what this does. And just to show that I am actually running inside of my init, I'm going to just simply print maybe an F string, and I'll say self.name recognized. Now, if I hit run right now, you can see that I am running into an error. It says that init is missing one required argument, name, and yeah, that's true. I forgot to pass in what my name is. That's going to be here, and I'm going to give myself a name, so I'll just say salty, I'll say killer this time, just to show that it's different from my variable here. And I'm not required to put in a playlist, as you can see. So salty killer recognized. And if I wanted to say salty dot, let's say name, I can also access these variables. So salty killer recognize, and here's the name, salty killer. I can also do the playlist, so salty.playlist equals an empty list because I didn't pass in anything. Now if I want to, I can, so I'm just gonna have comma, I'll have a list. I'll just put in some songs here, wanted, dead, or alive. And so now if I print my playlist, there it is, Jericho, wanted, dead, or alive. Cool. So what is neat is that if I comment out this print, notice that I have no print statements in here except for inside of my init. If I hit run, it's going to, my init, what it's doing, it's automatically going to run anytime your application sees a instance of your class. So if I say, for example, hey Alexa or hey Siri, what it's going to do is that it is going to recognize who it is and send it to the class, and then it's also going to send it my current playlist. Now let's talk a little bit more about self. Let's say that I have another person in the house, and let's say that their name is Bob. Okay, and I'm going to give Bob a instance of the class as well, and I'm going to send the name Robert. And then his playlist, for now, I'm actually going to just leave it empty. So what's cool about this is I'm still not going to say print, but check it out. It does recognize both people. So this is what self is doing. Whenever you see self, it's going to be referring to whoever the instance is calling. So right now, when it sees that self.name is actually talking about this one, it's going to say, okay, we need to pull up Robert's information. Or if it sees Salty, it will pull up Salty's information. And that might be confusing at first, and if it is, don't worry about it. You'll just start to get used to it naturally. And so I can say Robert, I can print Robert.playlist, which should be empty, okay. Oh, sorry, it looks like it's doing salty.playlist, so there's my playlist. Now let's do bob.playlist. Now it's empty. It's because this knows exactly which instance we're referring to. So that's what self is doing, is kind of pointing to who we're talking about. Okay, so just a little bit of a test for you. So if we go to greet, and instead of just saying hello, as you can see, doing bob.greet, it's just gonna say hello, right? So now we want to accept more arguments. So maybe I can say that this is their friend. I'll say Salty here, and Salty will just be the friend, okay? And I'm gonna show you how self can be inputted into here. So I'll do an F string, and I'll say, hello there. And now I'm going to say not name, but I'm going to say self.name, because self.name knows that we're talking about Bob. Okay, so hello there, Bob, hopefully. My name is friend. So take a moment and try to guess what you think this will say if I say Bob.greet Salty. Okay, and if you pause that and try that out, if you said, hello there, Robert, my name is Salty, you're correct. So again, this is looking for self.name, which is referring to Bob. And what is Bob's name? It is Robert, right? So it kind of jumps around a little bit. And then friend here is being passed in because that's what I said, or passed in to the method of greet. Okay, great job with that. What we're going to do now is that we are going to add another class that's actually going to be able to inherit some of these same attributes. So what I'm going to do is create another class, and we'll create Alexa. Now with this, with Siri, actually, sorry, don't need to put any parentheses there, and this should run just the same. But when we're coming to this class here, I actually want it to use some of the same attributes. And so I'm going to say Siri inside of here, and that will give me access to these same attributes, so I don't have to rewrite everything. So Alexa and Siri have a lot of the same functionalities, right? So what I'm going to say is, first thing I do after I create a class is say def init, and then everything has to start with self, right? And this time I'm going to pass in the person's name as well as something with Amazon, maybe like an Amazon account. And if they don't have one, I will say it's okay, we'll just make an empty string if you don't have one. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to, instead of do self.name, self.amazon account like I did up here, I'm actually going to inherit whatever is up here. Okay, and I can do that by saying super, and I'm going to say dot init, and let's say that I want to grab the name. Okay, so there's a name, and I'm going to grab the name right there. Now a lot of people think that there's a colon after this. There's not, so it might look a little bit weird. Now up here does not have an Amazon account, so I am going to assign that. So I'm going to say self.amazon account equals Amazon account. And let's see if this works. So I'm just going to print something. I'm going to print maybe who is initialized. So I'll just say something like f-string. I'll say Alexa recognizes maybe the person's name or something, right? Might have to be self.name. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add, maybe we can add another person. So I'm going to say Sally equals Alexa this time, and I'm going to say Sally Sue as the name, and let's see what happens. Okay, and it looks like that I just might have deleted my ending parenthesis right there. So let's try this out again. Here we go. So Sally Sue recognized, and that's interesting because check it out. So here's Sally, and here's calling Alexa, and I'm passing it Sally Sue. But do you see anywhere in here where it says the words recognized? It's not in there, right? It's cool because it's actually saying it up here. So Sally Sue is recognized. So I'm not having to rewrite any of that code. Also, let's say that both of these classes, let's say that both Siri and Alexa share something. For example, maybe we can say a language. So we can actually give it, instead of just methods like we've been doing, we can give it attributes, which will just be variables. So I'm going to say language equals English or something. Something kind of simple. Okay. So now if I print something down here, So let's do Sally dot language, and it says English. And that should work for Salty and Bob as well, because we are all sharing these same attributes. Pretty cool. Also, with Sally, we can look at some of these methods. There's greet. So I can say Sally dot greet, and greet is requiring a variable. So I am going to say Bob. Okay, now it says, hello there, Sally Sue. My name is Bob. Very good job with that. Now we're just going to add one more simple method to all of this. We want to look at our playlist, and we want to be able to add to our playlist. So for right now, I'm going to just get rid of my print statements. I'll keep my people here, my class instances. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about my HomePod at home. I say something like, hey Siri. By doing that, it will recognize my voice and go, okay, so Salty is talking. So I'm going to say, add this song to my playlist. And it's going to go to my specific instance, and it's going to say, okay, well, Salty has already got some of these items in his playlist. He's got Jericho and Wanted Dead or Alive. So whatever song he says, I'm going to add to that playlist. So let's go ahead and add that. I'm going to add that to our initial class here so I don't have to rewrite anything. So I'm going to say def add song, and of course we're going to have self because we need to let it know that of who it's talking about. And then we're going to say maybe the name of the new song. So I'll just say new song, colon, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my playlist, which is up here, and if I want to refer to the person's playlist, remember you have to say self.playlist. So self.playlist, it is a list, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a list function called append. Remember, append means to add something to that list. What do we want to add? Well, we want to add whatever that new song was, right? So whether this list is empty or it's already got stuff in it, it's just going to add new song to the end of it. And once we have that, all I'm going to do is I'll just return something. I'll return, and I'm going to say, okay. It's like Siri talking to me. It's going to verify that it was added. So you could do a try catch block right here if you'd like to. I'm not going to, so that this doesn't get more messy, but we're just going to assume that it worked. So I'm going to say, okay, whatever that new song was called has been added. You don't even have to say added to playlist. You can even be more specific. You can say added to self.name playlist. Just like that. Okay, so whoever it's talking about, it's just going to add them to the playlist. So let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm going to pick someone. I'll do Salty first. So I'm going to say print Salty dot the name of my method, which is add song. So Salty dot add song, and add song requires one argument, the name of the song, and we're going to say something like baby. And if I hit run, it says okay, baby has been added to Salty Killer's playlist. So that's pretty cool, but I'm not super sure if it worked, right? Here, let's try this. I'm going to print salty.playlist. This is before I've added it, and I'm going to do salty.playlist again after it's been added. And I'm actually going to get rid of this print statement instead of my init, so I don't have so much text up here. That's up to you. You can keep it if you'd like. Okay, so before I added, it says Jericho, Wanted Dead or Alive. And then after I told it to add the song Baby, it says, okay, Baby has been added to Salty Killer's playlist. And now you can see my new list, which is my old stuff plus the new song of Baby. And we can even do that with anybody else. So instead of salty, I'll say Bob. I'll run it. So at first, remember, Bob doesn't have a playlist. And so now Bob's playlist has one song in it. All right, so wonderful job if you went through that. So we did go through how to define classes, initialize our classes so that it recognizes whoever we're talking about with the instance, and we talked about inheritance so that we don't have to keep rewriting code or anything like that. This is a great way to think about how classes work. I always like to use real-world scenarios so that it makes a little bit more sense to you. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please make a comment if you have any questions, or if you come up with your own classes that seem really neat and you just love to share, please show us in the comments the program that you have created. Thank you so much, and happy coding.